The cold doesn't ask permission. It doesn't negotiate. In the Alaskan interior, during the winter of 1943, it simply waited, patient, absolute, and ready to claim anyone who made a single mistake. Leon Crane understood machines. As a flight engineer in the United States Army Air Forces, he lived inside the logic of systems, fuel lines, hydraulic pressure, engine temperatures. Everything had a tolerance, a threshold. Everything could be predicted, controlled. But on December 21st, high above the frozen wilderness near Fairbanks, all that certainty dissolved in minutes. The B-24 Liberator had lifted off from Ladd Field on what the manifest called a cold weather test flight. Nothing unusual. The war demanded it. Bombers were freezing mid-mission over Europe. Fuel was gelling. Control cables were snapping. So the Army sent crews into the Arctic to learn what broke, and how, and when. 5 men climbed aboard that morning. Only one would walk out alive. At 25,000 feet, the air was thin and merciless. Below, the landscape stretched white and featureless, a frozen ocean interrupted only by dark clusters of spruce. No roads. No towns. Just emptiness that looked deceptively soft from altitude but would break a man on contact. Then the plane started to shudder. It wasn't dramatic at first. A hesitation in the controls. A tremor through the fuselage. The kind of thing that makes an engineer's pulse quicken before his brain catches up. Crane watched the instruments. The numbers were wrong. The responses sluggish. Something deep in the aircraft's anatomy was failing, and failing fast. The Liberator began to roll. The pilot corrected. It rolled again, harder this time, as if the sky itself had turned hostile. Then it dropped into a flat spin, the nightmare scenario. Not a dive, but a rotation, the aircraft tumbling sideways through space while losing altitude in a sickening spiral. The horizon tilted, vanished, reappeared in the wrong place. Gravity stopped making sense. Inside the fuselage, the crew fought to regain control. The pilot, Captain John Sutherland, worked the yoke with everything he had. But a flat spin is a mechanical trap. Once it starts, recovery requires altitude, and they were bleeding it away with every turn. At 8,000 feet, Sutherland made the call. Bail out. Crane moved toward the hatch. The wind that tore through the opening hit him like a fist, brutal, invasive, instantly painful. At altitude, cold doesn't chill. It invades. It strips moisture from your lungs, freezes your eyelashes, turns breath into ice. He strapped on his parachute. His hands moved through the motions he'd practiced a dozen times, but never like this, never with the earth spinning below and the roar of wind drowning thought. The others stayed with the plane. It wasn't cowardice. It was choice. Sutherland believed he could land it. Crane believed otherwise. He jumped. For 3 seconds, there was only falling. Then the parachute deployed with a violent jerk that knocked the air from his chest. He hung there, swaying beneath the canopy, and looked down at his future. It was white. Endless. Silent. The bomber disappeared into the distance, a dark speck against pale sky, carrying 4 men and every piece of survival gear Crane didn't have. Then it was gone. The sound faded. And suddenly, the only thing louder than the wind was the absence of everything else. He hit the snow hard, sinking to his waist in powder. The cold climbed his legs immediately, invasive and patient. He stood, gasping, and took inventory. 1 knife. 1 box of matches. Parachute silk. Standard issue boots and uniform. No food. No compass. No radio. No idea where he was, except alone. It was late afternoon on the shortest day of the year. In 2 hours, maybe less, the sun would set, and the temperature would drop even further. Night in the Arctic is not a pause. It's an execution if you're unprepared. Crane knew what killed people out here. It wasn't starvation. Not at first. It was exposure. the body's core temperature dropping degree by degree until the brain started making decisions that felt rational but were fatal. Sitting down to rest. Closing your eyes for just a moment. Letting the shivering stop. He couldn't let that happen. He gathered the parachute and wrapped it around himself, layering silk against the wind. He burrowed into a snowdrift, using it as insulation. Snow, counterintuitively, can keep you alive if you're inside it. On top of it, you freeze. Inside, you might make it to morning. He made it. Barely. When dawn broke, his fingers were stiff, his toes numb. Frostbite was already creeping in, a slow theft that doesn't announce itself until the damage is done. He needed fire. Not for warmth alone, but for survival. Without it, his extremities would die. Then his core. Then him. He found shelter beneath a fallen spruce and built a nest of bark and shavings. His hands shook. The first match died. The second. The third. Each failure tightened the vice of panic because he couldn't afford to fail. If he ran out of matches, he'd be reduced to friction, nearly impossible with frozen hands and sub-zero wind. On the fourth attempt, he slowed down. Shielded the flame with his body. Fed it carefully. And when the fire finally caught, when it grew from a flicker into something real, the relief was almost unbearable. For a week, he stayed near the crash site. He spread parachute fabric across the snow. He built signal fires. He scanned the sky for rescue planes that never came. The Alaskan interior is too vast. A man on the ground is invisible. Search efforts, if they existed, were searching the wrong place. Eventually, Crane accepted the truth. No one was coming. So he started walking. He followed the frozen river because rivers lead somewhere. They connect. They draw people. It was the only logic available. Walking in deep snow is agony. Every step punches through crust. Every mile burns calories he couldn't replace. He rationed his energy like fuel, moving at a steady, mechanical pace. When he stopped, he built fire. When he slept in short bursts, waking to feed the flames before hypothermia could take hold. Hunger arrived slowly, then consumed him. He set snares from parachute cord, crude traps learned in Boy Scouts and half forgotten until desperation made them critical. Most failed. But on the fourth day, he caught a snowshoe hare. He killed it quickly, skinned it with numb fingers, cooked it over his fire. The smell of meat hit him like a memory of civilization. He ate slowly, reverently, knowing it was just enough to keep moving. By day 20, he'd lost 30 pounds. His uniform hung loose. His face cracked and bled. His beard grew thick with ice. He talked to himself, not out of madness, but necessity. The mind needs company. Alone long enough, it invents voices to stay organized. On day 35, the river tried to kill him. He stepped onto what looked like solid ice. It gave way. He plunged waist deep into freezing water. The shock stole his breath, triggered a gasping reflex that could drown a man in seconds. He clawed at the ice edge. It broke. Again. Again. Finally, he drove his knife into the surface like a pick and dragged himself out. Wet clothing at 40 below is a death sentence. He had minutes before his pants froze solid. He stumbled to shore, built the largest fire he could manage, stripped naked, and sat shivering while steam rose from his clothes. If the fire failed, he would die. It didn't fail. Around day 50, the wilderness offered mercy. A cabin. Small, weathered, abandoned, but real. Inside, a stove, matches, canned food, lard, and a .22 rifle with ammunition. Crane sat down and cried. He stayed for days, recovering. Eating carefully. Hunting with the rifle. When he found a faded map inside, it gave him what he'd lost, orientation. He was deep in Yukon country, but not beyond reach. There were outposts downstream. Trading posts. People. He left with better tools and new hope. He fashioned snowshoes, built a sled, kept moving. By day 70, he'd covered over 100 miles. By day 84, he found human tracks. Fresh. Recent. Purposeful. He followed them to a camp of Athabascan trappers. When they saw him, skeletal, bearded, half-mad with exhaustion, they recognized what he was, a man at the edge. They fed him. Warmed him. Saved him. When Crane reached Fairbanks, he weighed 115 pounds. Doctors marveled that he'd kept his fingers and toes. The military documented his survival for training purposes. He returned to duty. He refused discharge. When asked why, he shrugged. Lightning doesn't strike twice. Leon Crane lived until 2002. He reached 83. He married, raised children, worked as an engineer, and rarely spoke of those 84 days. When pressed, he offered only this: the moment you decide you're going to die, you do. He never made that decision. And that's why he lived.